remember having loads of vinyls, and then my mum relatively recently wanted to clear out of her house, which is where my vinyls were, and I chucked them. And now I regret that. So what does Scottish Enterprise do, and what is your role? So yeah, we want to help to create an internationally competitive renewables energy sector in Scotland by 2030. And we want to really push capital investment to push the productivity of Scotland as well. Really need more capital investment in the economy. My role, so I'm based here in Aberdeen, in Marshall College is where our offices are. My role is within the business growth team, which is account management. So I've got a team of account managers, some of whom are based in Aberdeen, and then we have a number of other colleagues in and around to engage with and build relationships with businesses around the region. I suppose my key focus at the moment is trying to work with more businesses, engage with more and work with more, and see how we can help businesses grow. And the other part of my role is a people manager role, which is one that I've done for any number of years, and always been an enjoyable part of it. And I think an important part is the interface between the corporate stuff, which is policies and ways of doing things, and relaying that back down onto the ground for businesses' real-world situations, I suppose, relating the two together and interpreting them. How does Scottish Enterprise support innovative and ambitious businesses in Aberdeen? We work with ambitious leadership teams in businesses, SME businesses predominantly, in our case, in and around Aberdeen. So account managers will work one-to-one with the leadership teams to try and build a plan or a strategy for that business of how we can help that business. And then we bring in part of our specialist knowledge that we have in things like innovation, things like workplace innovation, sustainability, and digital transformation. But then we can also network in some of the guys that know quite a bit about things like offshore wind and then hydrogen as well. So kind of a real account team approach to trying to address businesses' problems that are out there. We'll run a range of events, some smaller, some larger, focusing on business issues or information, just to help businesses and network them together into the right kind of place. So we'll run those kind of small events. When it comes to funding, we can offer direct financial support just in terms of grants, which it's fair to say that belts have tightened down the years, but there is budget still available and grants still available for the right projects. And we try to encourage, and we want our companies, our customers to access them. We've also got quite a big role. Funding is quite a complicated landscape these days. It's full of changing characteristics and really complicated acronyms, which is difficult for us to keep on top of. So for businesses out there, we know it's difficult too. So if we try and keep on top of that, we can help a business get the right kind of support for the right kind of project, because ultimately that means it's good economic growth and developing businesses. Ultimately, we believe in working in partnership. So that's a partnership between us and whichever the company is that we're working with and the leadership team, but also the external agencies as well that also has those levels of funding. Again, if we work together, we get the right kind of results and we can try and help to grow the economy. Right, who can access Scottish Enterprise support? Okay, well, we work with companies for all shapes and sizes. My team particularly works with SMEs, so that's companies with 10 to 250 employees. But I've got colleagues in Aberdeen that work with companies, global companies that are bigger than the 250. But then we've also got folks that work with high growth, innovation-led businesses too. Outside of that, then we've probably got people would work with business gateways, so at the smaller end of that kind of scale. I guess access to all of these categories is really ambition, the ambition of the business and the capability of the business to grow. I think there needs to be a willingness to engage, to open up, so that we can ask maybe challenging questions, sometimes daft lad questions as well, just so that we can get to the nub of where the issues may be and help properly. There's a few sectors we won't work with, so retail might be one of them, but I think there's a little bit of myth busting that I need to do, which is that we don't work with oil and gas companies. Oil and gas companies are moving into energy companies, and we know very well that those companies are supplying their anchors or their chains or their widgets into renewable sector or wider than that. So we're able to work with those business on those types of projects. So what sectors can you see booming in the Northeast in the coming years? So I'm no specialist in this kind of area really, so I've got a layman's view looking out on it really. I suppose for me it feels like in the Northeast there's still that energy transition to get through and get to. So there's a lot of technological development still to be made. There's a lot of strategic decisions still to be made, and there's a lot of money still to be invested, which kind of feels like that's right up the Northeast Street in terms of where it's been in the past. So what's not to like in that respect? From a Scottish enterprise perspective, we've designated 5 future industries: quantum, space, industrial biotech, fintech, life sciences. Will Scottish enterprise be involved offshore Europe? Oh yeah, I think we've been there years and years and years, so I wouldn't like to guess how many years Scottish enterprise has been there. So I've seen the stand design, and it's a different approach to what we've had in the past. The stand design is it's quite sharp, it's quite eye-catching really. So, and it's there to really show Scottish enterprises themes and what we want to achieve, and particularly that one of backing ambition. We're also putting together a show reel which is going to go on a 100-inch screen or something along those kind of lines, just to highlight some of the things that we're doing in terms of innovation and internationalization and investment, and how we might be helping businesses across the country, not just in the Northeast, obviously. The idea of that is to demonstrate how we're backing ambition in all ways that we can, in terms of innovating, delivering direct assistance with businesses, helping with their innovation, and working on the key missions that we think are key to growing the economy. And then, of course, our account managers from Aberdeen are going to be present, as well as all our other great colleagues based in Aberdeen. I say all, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them from Aberdeen, and then from across the country as well. And they're going to be keen on meeting existing customers, existing companies they work with, but also try to meet new companies as well, new customers, to see that we might be able to help them grow in the future. So that's kind of a key part to us, from my perspective, for us being there. What's your proudest achievement with Scottish enterprise? This is probably going to sound quite cheesy, I suppose, really, because I've been a people manager for most of my career, and it's always been people that have made the job the most rewarding. Scottish enterprise is no different in that respect. I can look back on over 15 years recruiting people. I see people that have recruited into my team, and they moved on, and they're building a career and making a good name for themselves and being successful in other parts of the business. That might be a reflection on my management, that they've left my team, but I'll take it as a positive. But the fact that it's the people that you remember and that kind of stuff, rather than so it's not really an achievement, but I guess it's kind of part of what I do and the purpose of doing what I do, really. So, what single piece of advice would you give to a young entrepreneur today? Okay. 15 plus years in public sector, then nearly 20 years in banking background. I'm not exactly the best qualified to talk about advice to an entrepreneur, I guess. A bit of wisdom that stuck with me down the years, and I think it relates to business as well as all works of life, really, is you got 2 of these and 1 of these, and use them in that proportion. And I think listening is a skill that's, I don't know, overlooked sometimes to some people. Some people are quite skilled at it, but I think for an entrepreneur, we can often see that they can chase the next shiny object, or the next big deal, or just go with a gut. And I get that can be exciting, but sometimes you need to listen, understand your customers, understand what your customers want and what they need. You can learn from people, learn from their mistakes, and maybe minimize the number of mistakes you make yourself. So I do think that listening thing is an important thing. The football one is put your foot on the ball and just have a little look around. So exciting though your entrepreneurship may be. How do you unwind when you're not in the office? So I really become quite sedentary over the last decade, probably. Um, I like my gardening. I like potting around in there. I'm a bit of a professional potterer, I suppose. Um, I've recently, over the last couple of years, tried to turn some of that over to a wildlife garden, which I've been quite pleased with, but it still needs some work on it. I'm an armchair sports fan, so I've recently enjoyed watching Tour de France. I like watching the cricket, rugby, football. I'm not glued to it in any way, but they're the kind of things I like doing. I'm a I'm a lifelong Leicester City fan, which 10 years ago felt like I'd won the lottery. More recently, I've kind of come back down to earth with a bump, and really it's kind of back to normal service. But I try not to let that wind me up anymore. So I've got used to that kind of service from the football team. Um, and then we've got 3 grandkids, 2 of whom live locally, so we see them quite often. That's not necessarily an unwind, but it's quite fun. Oh, it is fun. So yeah, they're the kind of things that we do outside of work. Which historical figure would you invite for dinner, and what would you cook them? Blimey. Um, so I'm a bit of a natural history or wildlife geek, and for years I've been fascinated by Charles Darwin and how he discovered, whatever he did, with the origin of species without the aid of Hey Google or Siri or an iPad or even a decent flat white or something like that. You know, it was all he had was a boat like was down in the harbour, similar to those that were down in the harbour. Inviting him for dinner might be a bit intense. So with your permission, I'm going to invite somebody else as well. Not quite historic, but it'll be David Attenborough. Can you imagine Attenborough and Charles Darwin having a chat 2 centuries apart about wildlife and the things that they've seen and the things that they've uncovered? So I think that'll be fascinating. As to what I'd cook them, I think Attenborough's probably vegan or vegetarian, so it'd have to be something like a mushroom Wellington or something along those kind of lines, I guess. So not that I've ever cooked a mushroom Wellington. What was the first CD you ever bought? I know the first single I ever bought was Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. And Queen and Freddie Mercury have been a bit of a soundtrack to my young life, particularly, I suppose. So I remember having loads of vinyls, and then my mum relatively recently wanted to clear out of her house, which is where my vinyls were, and I chucked them. And now I regret that. So the CDs I've still got, but I don't have a CD player. So there's a box of them in the garage, but I'm not throwing them away because I know what happened with the vinyls before that. I regretted them. So, hey, I may get a CD player at some time. But I reckon as Queen and Freddie were a soundtrack to that early life, I think it was probably something like The Miracle or Queen's Greatest Hits 2 or something on those, because it was like early 90s, something like that. So, Queen. Can't go wrong with Queen. Is it a Rowie or a Buttery? And how do you take it? You may have picked up that I'm not a local lad. So I'm afraid to say that it's not a speciality or a delicacy that I've taken to. But I'm going to put something out there. I'm going to kind of my go-to with a bit of toast or a crumpet would be Marmite. So I'm going to put it out there. You know, whether you like it warm or cold doesn't really matter. Marmite. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it.